Hi, in this video I'll show you how to attach an air grab sampler to a Restek Silcocan. So the first thing that you need are the proper sized wrenches. For this you'll need a 9/16 inch open-ended wrench and a 1/2 inch open-ended wrench. Adjustable wrenches can be used in a pinch, but it's much preferred if you find the exact size for the Swageloks that you use. Second thing I wanted to introduce you to are the Swageloks. Swagelok is a company that sells these nuts and bolts. They're compression fittings. They're designed to make airtight connections using only metal-to-metal seals, so they're very well crafted. Swagelok is the name of the company, but we use it as if it's a noun. These are Swageloks. Now the Swageloks come in a lot of different shapes and forms. Things that you should know are the ones that are gold colored are that we're sending over with the canisters are made of brass, and the silver colored ones are made of stainless steel. Now brass is softer than stainless steel, so between the two, if they are forced against each other, brass is the one that'll deform first. The other thing that you should know is stainless steel is much more expensive, but it's much preferred for anything that this air sample contacts. So the wetted parts are all stainless steel. We use brass basically to protect the rest of the components. So the brass parts are basically almost entirely used to protect the rest of the system. Okay, so you have a brass plug here, and you have a brass cap. These are what we use to protect open ends. And then what you have here is what is called a port connector. It's a female-to-female connection. This one's made of stainless steel. This one is made of brass. It should freely spin on both sides. And this component here is called a union, a male-to-male union. This one is the same size on both sides, but it could be different sizes on one side versus the other, and those are called reducing unions. Okay. So this is a Silcocan, and the Silcocan should come to you with a port connector attached to the valve. So this is the valve, and there are a few very important rules to follow. One is do not remove this port connector. This port connector was deliberately placed there to protect the valve. The valve, you can see, is a bit of an off color, kind of a bluish purple, which indicates that it's been treated with the Silco treatment. It's a kind of a inert surface that they've coated the stainless steel of the valve to make it even more inert, so that you can use it for sampling somewhat more volatile compounds like halocarbons and sulfur compounds. So do not remove this port connector. It is there to protect this valve. Okay, so you make and break the connections on the outer connection. Similarly, this grab sampler should have a union here, and that union is to protect this nut that goes to this grab sampler. As you can see, this grab sampler is also a little bit of a bluish purple color, and that means that it's been treated with that special treatment. So it's very expensive treatment, and we want to protect this nut at all costs, well, at some cost, and so that's why we put this union on there. So we make and break the connection outside, not right to the sampler itself. Okay. Usually this should be finger tight, which means that you can undo it with your fingers without wrenches. Okay. So we're going to attach this to there. You see that this is a 1/4 inch male connection. It'll go in this 1/4 inch female connection. So when working with Swagelok, you should always have 2 wrenches, one to hold one side, and the other side will be, the other wrench will be used to tighten or loosen it. So you just, it should only be very slightly tight. A small move will loosen it, and then you can use your fingers to loosen it all the way. You remove the brass cap from the port connector, and then when you do that, what I recommend you to do every time you break that connection is to flip the can upside down and give this little port connector a whirl. And this whirl will just get any brass flakes that may have come out because the brass is softer than stainless steel. Any brass flecks will fall out of the port connector right then, and that prevents it from going into the valve when you are sampling. which could damage the valve. So remember, we really want to protect the valve at all costs. You don't want any dirt or flex to get in here. Okay? So then you have your grab sampler, and it should fit in just nicely. You will tighten it with your fingers, and then you can orient it whichever way you want it to. You may want to orient it away from the knob handle, for example, and you should be able to tighten it almost entirely with your fingers. Okay? The wrench, you should tighten it 95% with your fingers, and then the rest of it with the wrenches. Again, use 2 wrenches, and what you really should get used to doing is using one hand to tighten it. Okay? And in fact, you should be able to tighten it with 2 fingers. If you use 2 hands, you'll over tighten it. You'll over torque it. And that's the second rule. Do not over tighten Swageloks. It'll distort the Swagelok's, and it won't make it any more airtight. All you really need to do is tighten it with 2 fingers, and if you have it on straight, that will make an airtight connection. Again, tightening it more, you might think you're making it more airtight, but all you're doing is actually damaging the Swagelok connections. Okay? And so that's how you make a connection with the Swageloks. Now let's say you want to remove it. Similarly, 2 wrenches. You can do it with 2 fingers. Break the connection. The rest of it is finger loosening, and then you can put the brass cap on, or the brass plug on here, and this should be just finger tight. For this system, again, do not remove the port connector. You're going to put the brass cap on there, tighten it 90% of the way, take your wrenches, 9/16 on the bottom, 1/2 inch on the top, and just tighten it with 2 fingers. And then it should be an airtight connection. Again, do not use 2 hands. It might be a little awkward at first to try to do it with 1 hand, but really that gives you a better feel for what is the appropriate tightness. If you do it with 2 hands, you'll never be able to feel it quite right, and invariably you'll over tighten it. And again, even though brass is softer than stainless steel, if you really crank on this tight, you will distort the stainless steel. Now, these port connectors are there to protect the valves, but these port connectors are also pretty expensive, so we don't want to damage these. The brass connections we're not so worried about. They cost like a couple bucks each. But these anything made of stainless steel, we want to preserve these. So that's another point that I wanted to make, is that when you make these connections, you want to make sure that it goes in really easily, really smoothly, almost the entire way. If you feel like it's difficult right when you put this on, it could mean one of 2 things. Either the threads have been worn out from previous bad treatment, or that it's not threaded on quite right. Again, 90% of it should be easy, just with finger tightening it, and then the last 10% with the wrench should be just a very slight tightening. Do not over tighten Swageloks. I cannot emphasize this enough. You just want to make it tight enough to make it airtight. And the second thing, protect the Silco parts. Protect these parts, because these are extremely expensive and difficult, if not impossible to replace. You might have to buy a new component altogether. I think that's it. So again, when you're finished sampling, just make sure that this is all tight, because if there's some sort of leak in the in this connection, then outside air might get in there, and then we might actually potentially have some contamination in there. But mostly you want to make sure that the valve is closed. And that's another important thing. Do not over tighten this valve. You tighten it all the way until it's just a little bit tight, but do not force it. Otherwise, it will get this valve will eventually lose its airtight connection. Similarly, when you're opening the valve, you just want to open it till it's loose. You don't want to open it all the way until it stops moving, because then the next person who might come up and not know whether or not it's open or shut because it's not moving. You should always be able to go up to something and just wiggle it with 2 fingers, and if it's open, it'll wiggle, and if it's shut, then it won't wiggle. So hopefully with those tips, the sampling will be fine. Remember to keep it clean. Try to make sure you don't get any dirt or breathe into this connection, into this port connector during or after sampling, of course, and try to keep everything free of dirt and dust. Okay, good luck.